So what I'm actually going to do is this line is just going to be a reference for me. I need to copy my section line up into the air, somewhere above it, just to give myself plenty of space up here. Now what I'm going to do is create an offset here. This is going to represent a specific elevation. We'll just go ahead and assume that it is, in this case, 21 represents our lowest elevation on the site. You could even go as far as to grab this text and copy it up here so that I know that this is 21. Now at this point I'm actually going to offset the section line at 1 foot intervals. Now before I do that, my units in this drawing are in engineering, which means I type in feet and inches for this drawing. For some drawings it might be in decimal, in which case you wouldn't include the feet or inches because that would actually throw off your offset. Wouldn't be a true 1 foot. So make sure that whatever you're offsetting is sort of in line with whatever your units are. In my case, when I offset 1 foot, it's going to offset 12 inches. If I were to simply offset 1, it would only offset 1 inch. So I'm going to offset this at 1 foot. See in my command line where I've indicated that. And begin offsetting this line straight up in the air. I'm going to need about 15 of these, so I can click, and before I make my next click, say multiple, and then just start clicking this up in the air. This will go at 1 foot intervals. Not really sure where I'm at this point, but I just need an ample amount in there. I'm going to pause and actually label all of these lines just so I have it recorded in here. So you can see that the lines have been created. I've labeled each vertical elevation change. Actually went one below to actually start at 20 in this case. These lines actually become the backbone for your section that you're going to be working on. Now, all of this needs to be tied directly to this section cut. And what's happening right in this area right here is going to be what's showing up in your section. The way that we sort of translate that is through creating vertical guidelines. So the first thing I'm going to do is find where my section cut line intersects with a contour line. In this case, it's really important to remember which ones are proposed, which ones are existing but will actually be in the final plan. In this case, this is an existing contour, but it won't exist in the final plan because we've taken the proposed contour and started anew right here. So this is the important contour line. I'm going to pull this line directly up. Make sure that you have your ortho on. You'll pull it up directly through the section. All right, I'm going to go ahead and copy this line over. And each time that my section cut line intersects with a proposed contour, I'm going to click that line. And you can see I have my snaps on. It's actually snapping to this intersection, which is really helpful. In this case, I'm going to snap all the way over as this is sort of working uphill. Now my first contour line right here is the 21 line. As I move up, I'm going to create a circle right here. This is just a temporary spot where I will then start my section line. I'm going to start it at this point, and I know that I go up 1 foot at 22, go up another foot at 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. And so this line right here, my section cut line, says that at this point my section cut is at 27 for the elevation. I can verify that by coming down here, clicking on this line, and seeing that it is in fact the 27 contour line. Now what you're going to notice is that I ramp up and then move back downhill in this particular situation. That the top of this path actually represents the highest part of my slope before I start moving back down to the 27, 26, and 25 contours, and even lower than that to the 24 contour. So the first thing I'm going to do is, once I've figured this out, I don't want too many guidelines in my way. I'm actually going to delete these out of my scene. You can see that my section cut line is still here. But it might be helpful to note that while I get to 27, we'll undo that delete, accidentally deleted the 27 contour, that it keeps ramping up just slightly. Now I can just guesstimate that this is between the 27 and 28, so this spot right here might be 27.5. If I wanted to be really accurate, I could pull this contour line up and make a note that it is halfway between these two contours. I can just offset, in my case, 6 inches and connect this line here. This becomes the edge of my walk. Now, in my grading plan, my walk is actually flat, except that it's flat across this direction. It actually slopes a little bit downhill in this direction. So I'm going to pull this line, which represents the other side of my walk, straight up. And we can assume that this will have a slight pitch to it. Now, we could also do the interpolation formula to figure out exactly what this spot would be, right? It's about 27 here, 28 up here, and we're looking at about 27.3. I'm not going to go through the process of figuring out what that elevation is, but to get the most accurate section cut line, you would actually formulate what this spot elevation is right here. I'm going to continue on to the 27 contour. I'm going to select this line, copy it over to the 26 contour, the 25 contour, and this 25 right here as well. Alright, so quickly going to grab the edge of my sidewalk, connect it to the 27 here, down once more to the 26, and to the 25. So erase these guidelines. And just for visual purposes, I'm going to offset the depth of my sidewalk 4 inches, the typical thickness of a concrete sidewalk. You might do it 6 inches for visual purposes, but we're showing sort of the depth of this concrete right here. And so you can see that my section is shaping up and mimicking the ramp up to the sidewalk and the ramp down towards the amphitheater. Now, at this point in my section, you can see that it's just been flat along the ground. This is no walls, it's mostly just a ramp coming up of turf, a ramp across the sidewalk, in this case, a ramp down in the turf. We finally hit a moment in our section where we have a wall. Now, this might not be the case for every section that you're drawing, but in this case, it is a reality. So I'm going to pull this guideline up, which is my wall. Now, the spot elevations are critical for what we're about to talk about here. In this case, the bottom of the stage, or the BOS, is at 24.55, so that's where the base of my wall should start. The top of it is at 26.55, so it's a 2-foot wall. I can look up in my section here, and in this case, I'm going to grab this contour and pull it about midway to get the 0.55. Now, in some instances, you might actually do the offset to get the exact measurement so that you can put it in a specific location. In this, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to slightly move it and eyeball it. Alright, but I do have to go up 2 feet. I can create a dummy line right here that is flat. I'm going to say offset and do it to 2 feet and offset this thing straight up. I'm going to go ahead and create a line from there to there because at this point I will delete my guideline. I want to make sure that my section hits the base of the wall, comes straight up to 2 feet that I've denoted as the height of this wall, and now I can start moving across my section again. Now, when creating the section line for terrain, it's fairly easy. You pull the contours where they cross the section line straight up and sort of connect from point to point and can get the terrain. Now, for more subtle things like this stage in this case, where we have slight slopes that actually don't cross a contour line, it becomes a little more difficult. Right? We can do it a couple different ways. I know that there's a 2% slope for the stage that moves across my section line, as I've denoted here. So I've got a 2% slope. And to create that, I could simply create a line that goes over, we'll say 100 feet, and then moves up 2 feet. And then I'm going to hit simply C space to close that. It creates a triangle. I'll delete my initial guidelines, and I can have created a line that is a 2% slope. Now another way to do this is to actually just use the spot elevations themselves and to figure that out in between, but I think this method works pretty well. So we'll come back down to our plan. We'll figure out where that 2% slope needs to stop. It will stop right at this wall. I'll pull this contour up and trim my 2% slope at that point. So I know that this is that 2% slope across the stage. Now that's one way to create that. And I'll continue that process for each of these steps, actually going up to the top of the wall here and following pretty much 2% across, up again, 2% across, up again, 2% across, up again, 2% across, and up again, and 2% across. I'll go ahead and jump forward and do all that. We'll discuss what that looks like. At this point, you can see that the section line is finished. I've changed the line type to a bolder line type and changed the color to blue so that you can see what is happening. So I'll try and show both at the same time. You can see that we have this grass area that's building up, builds up right here. We see that we have our sidewalk coming right across in this area. It slips back down, hops up 2 feet for the stage, across 2 feet. We drop down a foot at a time, and then we start terracing back up. All of these guidelines, you can see they all match up in this case with the terraces that are below and the additional contours that begin to ramp up once we get past the terrace. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it just starts to slope up. We also have a little wall here and this path that cuts through behind the terrace, and this little wall that shows up on the backside of our amphitheater to give us access down at an ADA ramp. Now, a few things we can verify. Our section line cuts through right between the 34 and 35 contour that isn't labeled in this drawing. And you can verify this by seeing that our path is cutting through the 34, between the 34 and the 35 contour. Now I've continued all the way to the curb, and you notice little important things that start to really give character to the contour to the section line that you're actually creating here. And it's things like a 6-inch curb, right? So we've offset this down 6 inches or half a foot to show the back of curb that happens in this area. So there's a lot of little things that you want to make sure to pick up on, whether it's steps or walls, even subtle slopes that are actually going to reinforce the intricacies of the design that you're proposing. Now, this section line in blue is the most important line. It is the line that you want to export and actually use for rendering purposes. You might want to export this line, plot it to a known scale, and bring it into Photoshop where you can collage in a few extra things. But before you do that, you might want to actually show in some of the subsurface things that are happening. If you have a wall, or as we mentioned before, the depth of a sidewalk, you might actually begin to show those pieces simply by drawing them in. In this case, I'm going to match the properties so it shows up as bold, and I'd probably be a little more careful actually going through this, but you might start to see a lot of the subsurface stuff. I'm actually going to pause and just bring in a few of these elements, and we'll pick up at that point. Alright, so at this point you can see that we have some of these subsurface elements in here. I've also changed the line weights to a few of these things, and changed the line weights for our vertical scale in here as well, right? We've got these at 1 foot intervals. They helped us piece this thing together. Now they may or may not be necessary for our final illustration that we're going to do with a section. You might even just export it as simply this line work and let that be enough for you. But you might want to actually put in plant material, put in trees, put in a sky, maybe even some background elements. Those guidelines will be helpful in sort of sizing these pieces. If you want to put in a person, you know that it is roughly 5.5 to 6 feet tall, so you would use these guidelines to size your people. This will be a really important element because your section line or section cut is to scale. Everything that you might do in Photoshop or Illustrator beyond this needs to be to scale as well, and so these guidelines might be helpful in that sense. So what I'm going to do is I've gone ahead and set up a layout tab and just used a standard detail template. Now I don't need all of these viewports, I really just need one to export out for rendering purposes my section. So I'm going to click in this viewport, navigate around until I can find my section. Now, as important as getting your drawing to scale, you need to get your section to scale as well. You can't just sort of eyeball it and call it good, right? So we're going to double click in here and we can try a few different things. I'm going to type 1 inch equals 10 feet and that seems to work okay. It would be nice to be a little more zoomed in. We can switch to architectural scale, maybe go as zoomed in as 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. That seems to work a little better. I'm going to pan over and just count that as good. Now I might select the viewport and trim out the plan that's below it. But an important element of this is actually providing a plan key. Right? This plan key will actually show you where your section cut is. So you might create a small plan key that you can zoom in and really highlight that section cut line. You can do a bunch of different ways. I will leave that up to you guys as to how to go about doing that. But this will be important for showing where your section cut is happening and then showing the section line itself. I might go ahead and plot this out. I've already got my plotter set up to a DWG to PDF, so I'm plotting this to a PDF. My CTB file is missing on this particular computer, but you might want to make sure that you've got the right one so your line weights show up exactly as you'd like it, and go ahead and plot that out. Now, what I would do is actually plot one that has the guidelines, plot another that does not have the guidelines. This gives you maximum flexibility. So in this case, I'm actually going to erase them. I would go through the plot process and then come through and undo back to having my guidelines in there. So I've plotted one of each, one with the guidelines, one without the guidelines. Now once you've plotted both of these to PDFs, you can open them up in Photoshop. This is where we're actually going to do the rendering or sort of adding some illustrative components to our section. We can also clean up a few things if needed, add color if you desire. As you can see, I've plotted one that has the guidelines. This is test plot 3, one that doesn't. I'm simply going to grab this layer 1 in test plot 3, the one with the guidelines. I'm going to duplicate this layer. Now, in here I can actually tell it to duplicate to another drawing, which is what I'm going to do. Once it's done that, I'm good. I've got them both in the same drawing. I'm going to close that and say don't save. Now, I always come in, I'm going to add a new layer, and then paint bucket that layer white and drag it behind. You can see layer 2 is the one with the guidelines, so as I turn it on and off, you can see that those appear and then disappear. And what's nice about having them as their own layer is I can simply change the opacity of that layer by hitting one of my numbers, 5. You can see it changes it to 50%. I can hit 2, changes it to 20%. This is where I can come in and start collaging trees and vegetation and people, different additional things into my section to start to give it character. Alright, so this is the conclusion of this tutorial. It essentially gets you from your existing grading plan to start creating that section line, right, and access with it using these guidelines. Now each section cut is going to be different, so there might be different steps to this process, whether it's using spot elevations to figure out where your next point needs to be, or just simply pulling guidelines up and wherever they intersect with that corresponding elevation. That's where you draw a line across. Subsurface components are really start to add a lot of character and quality, help make the plan actually readable, and they become important components. So you can use it under hardscape. You can actually print this out, go as far as to hand draw some illustrative components on top of it, whether it's just giving a little sort of subtlety to the grass right here, hand drawing in plants as you see fit, and scanning that, and then applying it on top. So there's all sorts of things you can do from here, but we'll sort of leave that up to your imagination.